What a palaver. Good gracious, I am so thick. Ah, dear. We've got one. Sorry about all this nonsense, I'm just thick. It's just a simple fact of life. I'm good in some great areas and then I'm pathetic in others. It's just the way the world. And of course I'm in it but not of it, but you know, there we go. So my apologies for that disruption. You're going to enjoy this anyway. It just means that we can't. I'm obviously having issues with OBS. I'm not up to scratch. So I think we might just leave that for a bit and stop fanning around because I'm obviously useless. Good evening. Don't think we're going to have any issues now. But the old live stream didn't switch off. It wouldn't switch off so I couldn't start a new one. So I ended up having to get rid of the browser, knocking that off and then open it again. But here we go now. Was there no chat option, eh? Well. You should have seen me. You were laughing. I was panicking. You should have seen stay to me. I'll tell you what. It would have been a video all on its own watching me flap there with that nonsense. So my apologies to all for wasting 18 minutes of your time. Okay, so got a little treat for you today. I thought we'd just get off the old history for a bit. So good evening to everybody. P. White, Slipknot, and A. LOA. Okay, so thank you. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and that. Because they haven't removed any subscribers this week, so I'm impressed. I'm impressed, actually. The YouTube might be on redemption, in my opinion. Oh, that's good. I've even drunk all my water now. What a panic on. Right, so this is an interview with a guy called Brent Johnson. It's supreme in its simplicity, but all what's actually important is if you're trying to play on the UCC and with all these forums, etc., I know a lot of people are, then what you've got to know and keep in mind is that you're not relinquishing your tie to the national insurance or social security number in using those forums, because in order to use those forums, you have to still be operating with the attachment of the social security number, which is extremely important that you know this, because whilst you might be running around thinking you're free to a point, you're not. You still got that attachment, which is the be-all and end-all, to be quite honest. So this is quite an interesting... I mean, we're only going to do snippets of it, obviously, because I don't want to be pinching people's work, but we're not pinching it. It's so simplicity and well presented. It is worth a bit of a push out there and you guys are going to benefit from this. So let me just find it. So what I'll do now is I'll start clipping it on. So I've just worked it out at the major points where I'll put it on, turn it off. That might get a bit messy, but hey, it's Sunday. We're allowed to relax. So get your beverage on, sit down, and let's analyse and explore law from this angle, because it does not in any way take away anything that has been presented to you guys from this platform when it comes to the grasp on what it is I'm trying to present to you. Probably badly, because that's just the way we end up waffling on about all sorts of nonsense. So I'm going to kick this off and we'll just take it from there. Okay, so now I have to just flop around a bit. Oh, see, technology is just too naughty. Right, so this is how it begins.
In their duty. Okay, what's been done over the years is the people, we the people, have been invited to voluntarily waive their rights in favor of corporate benefits. And by doing so, people have become subject to the government corporation.
So there you go. He's basically letting you know, as we've said here, that the only rights and freedoms that you're actually given as an absolute are your freedoms assigned from the Creator. Okay, God, if you like, whatever you want to call that force, that supreme being. Those are the freedoms allotted to man. Okay, so if you're operating under the sort of the parameters ordained by the Creator, then nothing else can subdue you unless you give it your consent. Okay, so that's basically just we're only going to be paraphrasing what we've already discussed and explored on this channel, because it's nice coming from an American perspective, because I've seen a mechanic that's really worrying, but however, if I can present it well at the right moment, it should help those who are wide awake see how using schismogenesis in creating these two parts, and what is an expert at it and has performed his role to this point, ready for something else later. So it is important, because I can also see what's going on in relation to how they're presenting this script, the ultimate aim of which is to have the Americans as people despise the English and the Scottish and the Welsh and the Irish or British as the narrative is using. So they're trying to create a divide on the people level. It's clever. It's exceptionally clever. And I'm glad I've seen it. Now, it's going to depend on whether I can explain it in the right way. Where, of course, is where it could all just fall apart any second after that. So, after that attempt. So, look, well, so we'll give it 5:45. Here we go. This is not as easy as I thought. So we're just slightly... Okay, now, what's presented here is a little bit of a thesis by Thomas Paine, who was one of the founding fathers. And when you get into the law side of things, whether that's in America or whatever, obviously in America, then this guy's narrative, this guy's take on things is supreme, in essence. And this is what he put together in December 23rd, 1776. So this is The Crisis by Thomas Paine. And he says, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the surface of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of men and women, from man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this constitution with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives us everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. Britain, with an army to enforce her tyranny, has declared that she has a right not only to tax, but to bind us in all cases whatsoever." And the all cases is in uppercase. And if being bound in that manner is not slavery, then is there not such a thing as slavery upon the earth? Even the expression is impious, for so unlimited power can belong only to the Creator. He uses the term God, of course. So what he's basically saying is what I've said, that in essence, that we look at slavery and the image that's come up is your black hat Kunta Kinte kind of stuff, you know. No, the slavery side of things comes in the manipulation and the volunteering of your consent to a game you don't fully understand, a game that doesn't disclose all that it needs to disclose if, as it does, it sees the contract as binding. However, you have to at least be aware of these concepts in order you can start to re-establish and reclaim your inalienable rights or unalienable rights. Yeah, this is what it's about when you're coming back to man, but you're not going to be subject to man's laws, because man's laws are created by man, not the freedoms and rights assigned to the creator. So and that is basically just in 1776, Thomas Paine explaining what the problem is, and it's the fact that Britain, the empire, and this is what's important, Britain, the empire, enforces its will with an army. Yeah, that's the problem, and which is why he says tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Okay, and it's not easily conquered because people don't recognize that they're actually existing at that level. Okay, and that's the trick, that's the spell, the casting of the spell upon you, and that's what puts you into the prison. And so it's a prison of your mind, which imprisons your body, because most people are fixed in the mind. So wherever the mind goes, the body's going to follow in it. Or, as they say in the old warrior world, control the head, you control the body. So there you go. The essence to that, of course, as we've discussed, is to get out of your head. Anyway, that aside, so now we need to move it on, which it gets good. It gets really good.
Day freedom fighter. Brent Johnson, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I love that you opened up with Thomas Paine, one of my favorites, if not my favorite founding father.
Yeah, me too. And I got to be honest with you. I've been quoting Thomas Paine lately because these are the times that try men's souls. Did you see what's going on in New Zealand? If you test positive for COVID, they're going to take you away and force you to go to a quarantine camp. It's absolute.
So basically, they go through a lot of this stuff and they're paralleling with what's been going on during the old thing. We don't want to get into that on here. That's not what we're getting into. But he's expressing to the Americans basically how the trap, because you're suffering all that and going along with it, is because of the contract. And so that's basically the essence of it. That actually shouldn't have come on. I don't know why I put that on. So I wasn't intending to have any of that kind of malarkey going down on here, but nevertheless, that's the sort of thing he's trying to get across to his American audience, and that's why it's important for Americans. This exceptionally important, actually.
At the time that they were working on creating Auckland as a super city, and they did a referendum vote among the population, and
so this is in New Zealand now. New Zealand is obviously a supreme forerunner where they're installing this Noachide system. So now they are pulling in the Noachide laws over and above the national laws, the nation's laws, etc. So it's shifted it into the corporate, and now it's one more again, and it's all being moved into the hands of the Noachide. And this is why it's important, this section, because obviously that's what they're doing in New Zealand. That's what's going to be coming out everywhere and anywhere. So it's all sort of intermixing, basically. So here we go.
96% of the people, amazing figure, voted against it. Nonetheless, what they did when they created the super city was they took 60 duly elected ministers, representatives of the people, and they removed them from power and inserted 19 appointed ministers, appointed by the parliament, to oversee and govern this new so-called super city.
So this is how this sideline your elected representatives is they appoint, because of course they're administrating, aren't they? They're administrating the assets of the UK government as a company. as bankrupt goods. And so, of course, that's why they needed to appoint these people, subverting your elected representatives. So the figure there was from 60 elected to 19 appointed. And can you see that? Because this is the strategy that's employed everywhere. This is not just in America. And here you can look at that through. So in Ironburn, we've got Globe Enterprises made up of 3 parts: 1/3 Bournefield Construction, 1/3 James Stewart Neverton and his wife, and the other third is to the councillors themselves that you elect. So if you've got 2, so sharing in this Globe Enterprises, which is what is controlling all the money via the executive of the councils. The corporate 2/3 share are way overbearing on the 1/3 share of your councillors. But what's clever about what they do there is the profits go to the 2 corporate, yet the liabilities get stuck on your elected representatives. So this is the strategy, and these are and then they've got the stakeholder committees in every area. Again, the corporate dictating rates, rents, laws, bylaws, etc., in your town, and they're always derogatory to trade, to your own personal bank account, because they're fining you for all sorts of nonsense, and it always serves the stakeholder employees, i.e. the supermarkets, because in a lot of terms they're the biggest employers. But in America they've done it. This is around the super cities, and of course that is exactly what they're putting out here. That you've got the corporate city mayor, you've got the police and crime commissioner, and then he's choosing between the mayor and the chief of PCC. They're choosing the chief constable, based entirely on how well he's going to operate the agenda, not of the nation states parameters, but under the corporate policy, ultimately coming out via government. So, it's again, it's the trap to all this is person as we understand it, but also that it's important to understand that the NI number here, social security number, is actually the account that operates all this fictitious bonds and securities being attached everywhere and all over you, basically. So we'll just move on there to, okay, it's quite a big move. And
could you even have imagined what's going on in our country right now? Listen to this.
You know, it's pretty amazing. If you go over to some stranger's house and knock on the door and say, okay, I'm imposing all kinds of rules on the people in this house right now, and if you break those rules, you're going to have to pay me money. They'd absolutely be beside themselves, call the sheriff, and have you arrested. But if you sidestepped and went to a costume shop and got yourself a nice blue uniform and cap and little tin badge, and then walked in there, all right, you folks are going to have to behave differently. You're going to have to give me money. They would go, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, there we have it, basically, isn't it? So what he's leading to here is, and he's going to reference Goebbels, actually, who said, it doesn't matter what you present to the common people. If you present it in the correct way, they'll believe it. Or 80%, because the figure of 80% seems to get used in relation to how, in any society, 80% of the population are just going to suck on whatever tit is offered, whether that's via the television or whatever. That's 80%. That's a big chunk of people in it. You know what I mean? That are just going to blindly obey. But that's 20% that are not. So where are we there?
Joseph Goebbels' propaganda. Joseph Goebbels, the information minister for Adolf Hitler, was absolutely brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. And he understood that if you tell the commoners, if you tell the people anything at all in the right way, they will the majority of them will buy it, will go for it. And from his perspective and what's going on today, it didn't matter that the minority didn't buy it. What mattered was the majority, because the majority would go out there and would support whatever it is that they were being told.
So there again, and which we've just witnessed, have we not, in this last session, the majority, whether they'd do it from the get-go or do a bit of kicking and screaming and striking and moaning, they've got a point which they're going to just shit and bust and go along with the game. And that is a fact. And it's a reality that we need to contend with. And because people that are working to wake people up and to move them to just flip out of this, this blind obedience, those are the people, the 20% of the people we need to be moving with, because 20% is way above the average percentage that you need for a movement to work in unison to get the results that are desired. In spite of the 80% who are just running around on empty, empty heads, as it were. So, yeah, these things are important because, we waste so much time trying to blag people who are absolutely 100% not interested in listening to anything outside the paradigm that the TV gives you. And they'll just argue with you all day. And we do waste a lot of time, and it does drain you. So again, it's like, well, let's focus our energies even more to the people that we know are in the mix. They want to benefit from it, and they don't want to succumb to this garbage, because as the fears get more and more expansive, as it were, so that's a fair point to keep our eyes on. Now we're up to quite a bit.
I had a couple of things to say. First, I want to address propaganda briefly. Okay, I do a segment on my show called Propaganda 101, and it just teaches people how to see through propaganda. And I'll give you two simple examples of propaganda that you may not even have ever thought of. Okay, if you read a story, a news story, any story that mentions any government that is either the U.S. or allied with the U.S. always talks about the government as an administration. Any story that addresses a government that is not allied with the U.S. or is a direct enemy of the U.S. talks about the government as a regime. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi and Libya.
And Assad and all of it. It's always, and when you think of the words administration, you think something proper. And when you think of the word regime, you think something evil. I'll give you a second example. Okay, how many times have you ever seen a television commercial for the military? Be all that you can be. Okay, the true, the proud, the Marines, all that. And at the very end of the commercial, in the little letters, it always says, paid for by the U.S. Army, or by whom, whatever. It's always paid for by the government, which means it's paid for by the taxpayers. Now understand, if you become a member of the military, you sign on to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, you become literally a subject to the government.
Subject to the government. That's a bit... So not your nation, as we all believe when you're sort of dreaming of a life as a soldier. You're not working for the nation. You're actually under full control of the government. And of course, they bankrupt their administrative cabinets, as it were, or administrations, and they're serving the banks under bankruptcy. So that's a real important thing for anybody who's in there or is considering going in there. You are not joining something, the thing you think you're joining, because they've been hijacked. They've been hijacked, and that truth is not being presented to any of you when you go to sign up to what you perceive to be serving your country.
So, taxpayer dollars are being used to promote waiver of your rights in favor of becoming subject to government. Talk about propaganda.
Yeah.
So that bit of an insight again to the propaganda, how Goebbels says it doesn't really matter what it is you want to shove upon the common masses. If you do it in the correct way, they'll have it. The 80% will. They will take it up, suck it up, and take it on as real and promote it and defend it. That's the important bit, you know. So when they've been trying to get up this, you're not got one of the nappies on, you go kill people, and all that kind of stuff. That's the division, isn't it? That's the autism, the feedback loop that they're driving into everybody from that event. So yeah, very, very interesting. And where are we now? 24:32. So look.
And just before I get to that, just the corporate personhood, by the way, you should understand that, particularly in the U.S., but it's also true in most countries, every state has been incorporated. Since the early 60s, all 50 states are corporations. And you have two coexisting states in each state. You have something called the capital S State of California, which is a corporation. And because it's a corporation, it is subject to federal law. It is underneath the federal government. Okay.
Now, that is exceptionally important. That Americans understand what he just said there, that all this shenanigans has got nothing to do with America, the nation of Americans. It's everything to do with the Federal Reserve, which is a banking system. Now, this is important because I can see the blag they're trying to play in, as I said earlier, building up this division between American people and Britain. Yeah. Now, and they're using the times of the War of Independence, but of course, in them days, it was the Americans that had settled there, and a lot of them were from England. Let's not beat about the bush. Against the British Empire, which were being run by the Hanoverians. So this is the Prussians. Okay, so already post-Civil War in England, the Prussians are now in full control of the monarchical system in England and Scotland and Wales, and they call it Great Britain, which is a title. It's you could say, occupation title. And my earlier videos from a couple of years ago, we discussed the idea that we're under occupation, and we used the terms that you would hear quite often, which pretty much show that they're operating in that jurisdiction. But we'll not get too far into that at this minute. But I've lost my train of thought there. So where are we? Only 20. So just let me backtrack there because I forgot what I said.
But it's also true in most countries. Every state has been incorporated.
Yeah. So let's have a look. 26. Then I'll come and see what you guys are chatting. Maybe I should have come a bit earlier, actually, in case there's a problem.
Court, and you cite the Constitution, the judge will actually say in court, the Constitution doesn't apply in these matters, because it doesn't. You're dealing with corporate law. It's not what the Constitution created. Constitution created the actual government. The government created the corporations.
So can you see that? So even that applies to the English Constitution. It's the English Constitution that created the government, and the government was supposed to operate within the Constitution. That's not what it's done now. The government has created corporations and installed them in our civil society. So where we were paying for our state to run our affairs, the corporations are now running them. So that means the money's going out of the nation. So when Thatcher privatised everything, as it was before, rail, gas, electric, mail, all these institutions were nationalised, which meant we owned them. Not only did we own them, every time we used them, we were paying money back into our own pot. We had mass employment because these operations were mammoths. And that's a smart procedure to have in place. If you're going to have a big state, you want everything that it does to be benefiting the nation, absolute. You want the money staying in there. You want the money to be going back out into your country. Not after privatisation, you're spending triple the money and it's off into these banksters' back pockets. Because, of course, now all the corporations are the outsourced providers to our entire civil systems, aren't they? Which is rather worrying, let's be honest. So I'm going to come and have a look and see if you've got some chat on. So good evening to everybody. Oh, you should have seen me panic in the background. Every time I went back to do a live stream on YouTube, it went back to the other live stream. So I ended up, after a few do's, realising I need to break the connection. So I killed the browser and that did the trick. Evening all. Yeah, thumbs up. Give it some thumbs up, chaps. Has anyone seen Orange Woods Academy here on YouTube with a look goes on about the birth certificate? Some excellent info, truth talk vids. Evening, Andrea, Lineshare, Jason, Stephen W. Yeah, man, good evening to everybody. Lineshare, the main reason we are in the prison could well be if your birth certificate is a 10-box cert with a 10 empty, no name entered. If a 17-box cert, the same will apply for box 17 with look. Well, no, the thing with the certificates, you see, what you have to understand is what they are and what the limits are also. But the actual certificate being in your hands is the evidence that you are the beneficiary by right or by privilege, let's say. But we can use the term right in this case. So that is the evidence that you are the beneficiary. All the trickery then is getting you to relieve yourself of that position because you haven't got a clue what's going on. And we have discussed that, so we don't need to go into that too far. But I know there's a lot of people sort of dissecting these certificates up and whatever, but I'm not sure. I mean, carry on by all means, but I'm not sure it's gonna release some magical system that gives you all. You just have to keep your beneficiary right, and then when you're acting in any capacity, so you're communicating to anybody, you make it clear that you're as settler. So you can make it clear that you're beneficiary either by your signature or your autograph, the way you put your autograph together. That's another way of ensuring that you're autographing it off as beneficiary. But if you're going to move in the trust in any way, you want to make it clear that as settler you're doing this. You know what I'm saying? If you're acting in a capacity as trustee in any point, you want to make it clear. So you've got to be distinctive in relation to what you're doing. When you're trying to pulling it forward, that you understand that the trust exists, you have an interest in it. It's not you. You don't own it. But the fact that it was set up on your behalf for you as a beneficial thing. Keep that in order, and then you can have these people that are bringing an action having to settle it to your benefit, of course. So anyway, so I don't know. Carry on if you must, but I'm not so sure you're going to come up trumps on that study. Hello, amigos, Sparky Lee. Hello, Cos, Elite, good evening. Join me, Vicious. Oh, I'm just new last week. Okay, welcome. It's been a long game they've been playing. It is, but when you look at what they've had to divert, what they've actually had to accomplish to divert everybody's attention, it does give everybody an excuse. I think the problem comes in, if you can explain this to people, and you can see that they understand what you're saying, but they're just not prepared to take it on, then that's cowardice, isn't it? That's the infantile side of things. I mean, that's the problem. It's not that, everybody out there has been duped we know this, but it's a difference for a lot of people, and the more ingrained it is in, like, i.e. the older you are, the more difficult it is for you to accept and acknowledge that you've been duped, basically. But you know, if you've got the manhood to do that, then once you've come to terms with it, you've laughed at yourself, cried at yourself if you want, depending on how significant a sort of breakthrough it is for you. The way forward is not to hate yourself and then get into a worse despair. It's to just recognise that you were at fault and change it and move off it. That has got to be the game. Wish you come on. Question the limited company process, Indy. Oh, are you? Hello, Indy. You all right, Chuck? And Debbie Burnett. Good evening. Right, so we'll get back to that. So, can you hear it all right and what have you? I think you can. The argument is when a holder of the BC, you want a child minor. Child's name, not name. The argument is when you have a limited company, you have a grown-up BC and you want to. But how are you the owner of the certificate? You can't be the owner of the certificate. It doesn't gel for me, this stuff. And as I said before, I don't give it much thought because it's not what I'm focused to. Let me have a look at that again. The argument is when a holder of the BC or the child or minor, the BC. Yeah, but you're supposed to reclaim your positions in the trust, aren't you, when you come of age? We fail to do that. But no fraud, it's unlimited, isn't it? You can go back to any fraud once you realise it. And it is a fraud in the sense they're not telling you. They're not telling you that you're volunteering yourself to let go of your inalienable rights and exchanging it for privileges and benefits. They don't tell you that that's what you're doing. So, you know, there's no disclosure there. It's a void contract. I mean, we're so far on with it now, the power of the courts, because the commercial courts, and all the sorts of barriers they have when you do try to pursue some of these issues, where they can get you through for a bit, you think you're getting somewhere, and then bang, you get to the last hurdle, and you're knocked off. You know, that's the way they do it. However, there is some chap, however, and this is another reason why this video is important. However, although I didn't have a chance to go through the entire video with just sorting out what's relevant to us and what isn't. So if you like this, I can put it up at the bottom of this for you to watch it all yourself if you like. That's probably better than doing a part 2 on it. So we'll do that. I'll just let you can listen to it. But it's very interesting. But what he's sort of putting in the mix, and I'm taking nothing away from Chris Houser, he's doing a great job if you want to go down that route, but this guy's making it clear that to fill out these forms, you are not giving up your attachment to the national insurance number. And that is highly important because that is the ultimate joinder. And the thing that makes all this funny money, fiat, worthless money operate. It's the Social Security and National Insurance bank account, because that's where it's all going on. So as good as the info is that Chris is putting together, and as I said, a lot of it for me, the importance why I shared is because he does use terms that I've brought to the table. And I know a lot of people don't necessarily grasp its validity. And I think if you have watched some of his stuff, you realise its validity because that's how it's a part of this system. So court of record, notice of special appearance, etc., etc. These things are highly, highly important, but you've obviously got to know what they are, what are you doing, and why you're doing it. And then you've got to be able to keep it going on the old verb, on the verbal side of things. So, yeah, he's a good chap. Stand for owner of a limited company certificate. But the person is still the owner. You've You've put ownership of that entity, the business, in or on the person that's owned by. So you can protect yourself from whatever commerce you do within a limited company is protected. I.e., so if you're setting off but your business that you set off in a limited company, anything that you accumulate yourself on a personal level is protected if your company goes tits up. So they can only take the assets within the company, the limited company. Anything you've accumulated and classed as your own personal, so it secures that I do know. So I have been aware of what some people are saying about this thing. I know it's not difficult to do because anybody can set up a limited company. It's not difficult. You just have to understand that unless it's dormant, you're going to have to put up accounts every year for everybody to see. Yeah. So, and then of course, because all the money that you're putting together in that limited company is then income, and income is taxable. Where you want to be on exchange isn't a taxable thing, unless of course you fill out a form, put all that exchange in there, and say yeah, it's taxable. So here that'd be your tax return. You know, each year you're telling. So they have a ledger with an amount they think you owe, but that's in one column, but they need you to send in the same and say, yeah, I do. That's what I've had taxing. You don't want to be doing that, do you? So that's the game. So it's when you send in that tax return, I think the 1099 something or the UCC stuff, you're actually handing it over and saying, look, here you go, this is what I've done as an income. Sodomize me. You know, that's anyway. So again, the consent side of things on that is, it's important that people, yeah, no, it doesn't trade, it's dormant. But you've also got to consider, people, what's going to happen when this Noachide system shoves itself over the top of everything. You know, that's a game changer. Like, people are not necessarily grasping. And I've had a lot of interest lately. People really want to know a bit more about the Noachide. But it is out there if you look. It's probably a hot topic to be pushing on live streams, you know. So we have to be careful. But it is there for you to look at, you know. It's the sub-laws that are the problem. On the face of it, it all looks well. And then you've got to understand that the entire script of it is taken from Maimonides' view of Judaism, which isn't necessarily the Hebrew tradition. Let's get that fact. And as we've explored, the biblical text was written and put together entirely by the house of Judah. You know, I mean, that's not a script that we should have carried forth into the New Testament. It shouldn't be attached to it at all. Because the old one was how they broke the law, and the new one was the reinforcement of the law and saying this is a reset. These are the real laws. Off you go. So tainted again because you had the Cathars in. Yeah, they're not the Cathars, the Carthaginians in, which basically, whether they're from Spain or whether they're from Carthage or whether they're from any area of the Med, you're still basically looking at the Phoenicians, you know. And they ensured that this Old Testament was attached to the New. And as I've discussed before with you, that if you get down to the nitty-gritty, the only real gospel we should be taking notice of would be the one put together by Luke, who from that, the canon put together first, I think 114 AD, had absolutely zero Old Testament information, scripture, narratives, nothing, none of it. Because it was classed as Babylonian. So that's basically where they were at back in the day. So we should only be on Luke's version of the Gospels if we were to be representing what has been attached to that man, Jesus. You know. So that's another bit of an interesting shindig. It's dormant, no contract, no obligation. 1099 reclaims all your expenses. It does, if you do it right. That is why I want you to come on and talk to us. Yeah, but I've said to you before, I'm not an expert on the 1099 stuff and all that because it's not something I've ever pursued. If you went under Divine's process, you ended up opening an account with the IRS, and then you opened another account with the Securities and Exchange Commission, not necessarily in that order. And, you know, I straight away had a worry, or a concern rather, that in opening an account with the IRS, are you not then subject at some point down the line when they see fit to be paying tax to Uncle Sam? You know, again, these things, I mean, I didn't pursue it to find out whether that was correct or not. But the concepts that it brought up to my mind were, so these are things I've never really pursued. How come you don't use 1099 anymore? Well, I never have. I've never got into that side of things. We've discussed it in past videos because I know a lot of people that have. But no. You see, and I'll say this again, I'm not about after the money of it. I don't care about the money side of it. You know, it's not what I'm looking at when I've been studying the law. It's not about how much money can I make, who can I sue, who can I fine, who can I put lien. I'm not particularly bothered about that. My journey into that has been to try and understand what England was originally, why it ain't that now. What the hell's happened that in this last 100 years, what was England has been completely and utterly undermined. That was my input early on as to what the hell was going on. That's what I wanted to know. Oh, that was a question. Okay, that's fine. Sorry, well, I'm rabbiting on. So we'll get back to the shindig. 26, 27, so we need to go to 39, 38. It's well worth a shove to this video. So I will put it up under here. Right.
A lot of these people are truly in the grip of the Antichrist.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. All right, let's talk about corporations and corporate person. And corporate is an important word here because you have to understand all corporations get their existence from corporate federal statutory law. So all corporations are subject to the government. Now, when the U.S. was created, if you have a flow chart, you would see God is on top. God created we the people. We the people created the Constitution. The Constitution created the government. The government created all the administrative agencies and all of that stuff. Okay, that's the pecking order. Okay, however, what has happened over the years, and it's been done through very insidious, fraudulent methods. Okay, what has been done over the years is the people, we the people, have been invited to voluntarily waive their rights in favor of corporate benefits. And by doing so, people have become subject on the flow chart to the government corporation. That is, you talk about taxes.
Okay, so he's making it very clear that it's the federal system and that because the governments are bankrupt, they're now operating under the administration of the bankers and they're deciding whose debts, which creditors are getting paid with our tax money, which is why none of our tax money is going back into our pot. It's all being shifted out to the banks and they're signing it off. Well, that's going to pay that debt that your government's got. So each time they've bailed them out, each time they've been spending all these billions and gazillions on all this nonsense in the last couple of years, that's going on our debt, the government's debt, you know. So, but this is what's important for Americans because the blag that they're using at the moment is they're trying to parallel this to be the same time as the War of Independence. But let's just look at the difference between Britain War of Independence time in the 1700s and what's happened to these lands since that time. So if we go back to 1812, this is when the Rothschild, specifically the House Rothschild, secured full control of the English monarchy. Okay? That's 1812, Rothschild, full control of the monarchy. 1815, Rothschild gained full control of the stock market, the British stock market. Huge thing, okay? In 1914, the same, in bringing America into the war, the First World War, secured the UK government, which it was then now called, in support of the nation we're not allowed to speak, okay? So they bagged the British government, did the House Rothschild. So that's monarch, stock market, government. And then in 1979, under Thatcher's wing, so that's Heseltine and all that bunch, they incorporated our infrastructure. Okay? Same entities buying it up. And that's, so you could say the British infrastructure was then completely absorbed. So that's our energy, you know, that's our telecommunications, it's our air travel, you know, our rail, our buses, everything that we paid into our own system and then paid back out in wages and services that we all benefited from. So you can see that the British that's being bandied about now in this new script, and the role of the blonde bombshell in America, who's making the claim of coming back in 2024. So his role in this schismogenic implementation of a feedback loop, which we've discussed, was basically to say, look, all you Americans, you're not Americans. You are right wing and you are in opposition to the left wing. That's what they've done through that. They've secured that. And they're now using the script that the British, us, Britain, is attacking the blonde bombshell in America. So they're now pitting this new right movement that they've set up in the same vein as the wars of independence back in the 1770s, where it was against the Hanoverians, George, and the Prussian Imperial Empire, which is the British Empire, not England. They're now trying to shift that into the same kind of narrative and pitting it against the blonde bombshell that you all adore. So it's really important that we understand that what's attacking America is the Federal Reserve, which is subordinate to the Bank of England. And who runs the Bank of England? There's Rothschild, through the inner city, right? So when we talk about Britain today, as he's going to be raised up from the cauldron by the blonde bombshell in America as he moves to get himself into 24, is false. It's fake. Because it's the banks, it's the Fed is your immediate issue, and then it travels over into the Bank of England here, which is also our problem, an issue, because our government's operating under its control and administrating all the assets, which is all the persons, in order they can best pay the creditors of their choice. So they're deciding who's getting paid. And I can assure you, it's not your roads, it's not your infrastructure, it's not your rights to travel. The only thing they're spending money on is tyrannical police, corporate, private security, mercenaries, if you want to call them, foreigners to England, but components of the British Empire to the core, as are all the immigrants that have been brought in since 1922 as components of the British Empire, not England or Scotland or Ireland or Wales. And again, these things need to be understood, because that is really the narrative they're going to start pushing in these next few years under the blonde bombshell over there in the big old USA. Okay, so that's the important part of what I said earlier in the beginning of live stream that I wanted to get across, because it's exactly what they're going to do. I can see it. So 40.54, we now want to be on 41.37.
who headed up the raid ended up getting fired after I did what I did. But that's a completely separate story here. So what happens is this, that you have certain rights that you were endowed with by your creator. How many, show of hands, folks, how many of you were created by government? Then you didn't get your rights from the government, okay? However, among those rights, think of rights as a tool. You can lose your arm, you can lose your leg, you cannot lose your rights. I don't cotton to people telling me they're taking my rights. Nobody's taking your rights. They can't take your rights. Your rights are more a part of you than your arms and legs. But your rights are a tool. And like any tool, you can make an agreement not to use them. I can enter a contract with you that says, I own this hammer, but I'm not going to use it. And I'm bound by that contract if I entered into it voluntarily and knowing what I was doing. And that's what most people have done, though they haven't known what they are doing. Okay, they have entered contracts to take the tool that is their rights and put it on the shelf. I agree not to use my rights voluntarily in order to become eligible for all of the corporate benefits. You'll notice all the corporate benefits, Social Security, welfare, food stamps, unemployment insurance, workman's comp, small business loans, etc., etc., all of that. None of that is authorized by the Constitution. That's how you know it comes from the corporate government, because the organic government can't do that. It can't take from one group of people and give to another. It can't do that. Only the corporation can, because it is not subject to the Constitution. So what happens is they come out and they say to you, well, we're going to give you all kinds of benefits. What they don't tell you is that when you become eligible for the benefits, even if you haven't applied for the benefits themselves, it's your eligibility. When you become eligible for those benefits, you have agreed to waive your rights in favor of the privilege of being a federal corporate U.S. citizen.
Can you see? So this transfers to the English realm, the common law. You're still a citizen, and we're a constitutional monarchy, which is different again from the American Constitution. So when it says Her Majesty's courts, Her Majesty's government, that's exactly what it is. And as we explored last week, in 57, the current Queen did make it clear she wasn't here to give us laws or administer justice. She was giving us her heart, which of course then translates as the incorporation of everything, because it's all happened under that watch. So nobody is, or I'm certainly not, tearing apart our system. I'm trying to point out at all points, no, the powers in situ at the moment are the ones that have undermined everything that we hold dear. And that's the difficult part. That's the difficult sort of narrative to get across to folks out there, because as soon as you start to mention this subject, they automatically assume that you're attacking the system, you're attacking the Queen. You know, you give sovereignty to the office of monarch, and providing that the incumbent has taken the correct oath for that office, then we're in business. The realm is being upheld. That hasn't taken place, as we saw in 57 with the direct, communication that as a monarch, as an acclaimed monarch, she wasn't giving us laws and she wasn't upholding or administering justice. That's the key to it. It's now you can go whichever way you want. Has she been compromised all these years and extorted? Maybe, if it's the case that this shenanigans went on during the coronation oath and a bit of skullduggery there, then it's been there from the get-go, and we don't need to concern ourselves too much about the extortion side of things, unless that trickery has been the extorted, the point of extortion, in which case everybody and anybody can do that. And one does wonder then what power Jimmy Savile really had because, you know, any images you see when he's around the monarchs, especially in the old days when they were always on telly, wasn't what you'd expect from royalty to a jumped up, strange-looking DJ. Albeit now we know that he liked to have sex with dead people and other things of that nature. And he was behind the Yorkshire Ripper, which was more than one, and very likely connected to the cult that the Cromwell murders brought to light. I can't remember his name. But yeah, I mean, to what degree was Savile involved in these satanic networks, creating these terrifying events in the 70s, and then with the Cromwell stuff as well after that. And then you've got people like the murders in the 60s. I can't remember the name I found on the moors up in Yorkshire. The couple. You know, I think he's dead, isn't he? Again, that's been suggested that were a part of this network that Savile commanded. So you can see interconnections in all these events that terrified the population in the 70s because they were all watched on the television. As part of this network that Savile apparently headed. And so what power did he have? Was he on the scheme of the extortion? You know, could he extort the monarch at any time he wanted, and which is why he got away with what he got away with? Or, as we are sort of encouraged to believe, that the Queen herself heads all this stuff and is happy to do so. I don't believe that for a second, because, of course, the House Rothschild took over the British monarchy in 1812. So, no, I'm not having it that anything. It's just they've positioned the English monarch, the office, as a front for this affront on global nations. So it's really important that Americans see that difference, because they're really going to pump this up through your blonde bombshell superhero over there in the USA. It's going to be the same everywhere, as they bring up this hero worship now, isn't it? We're back on Roman imperial worship of emperors and such. It's quite ridiculous if you think about it. See what you guys are saying. Your children are addressed as master until the age of 7. Yeah, if I caught, we need to put right. Yeah, being dormant and trademarked to stop the vampires. But what are you trademarking? Your name? But you're still only making a use of it, aren't you? The name itself doesn't belong to you unless you accept it as such, and then you're in a whole lot of trouble. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how this works, but I'm not seeing it going past installation of Noachide. Yeah, but you've got to remember the 1099 is UCC. You see, when you start to see the trust as it is, providing you don't relieve yourself of beneficiary, any trust action that's brought against that trust has to benefit the beneficiary. It can't harm the beneficiary. So if you're going to act then knowing full well you're the beneficiary by right, then you're going to be acting as settler or executor, administrator, whatever term you wish. Settler would appear to be, in our opinion, the supreme, because there's no distinction. It is what it is, you know. So settler, you would be you'd be moving in that trust as the settler, and you can then appoint the trustees. If somebody's bringing a trust action, and you've held your ground, you've held your rights as beneficiary, and you're operating as settler, and you make it clear that you are, then you can appoint that guy. You can offer an appointment of trustee. Now, if it's a civil servant, which the police are, because they're claiming to be operating for the crown itself, which determines them as civil servants, then you hold that jurisdiction. You put on them a fiduciary role, and they're not allowed to refuse a fiduciary role, because then that's, what is it, something in public office. Anyway, it's one of them. So, me personally, you can go down these paths if you like, but it's not the sort of the path I'm working on. And I like this idea of really solidly understanding that you're right by right beneficiary, and as settler you can appoint and do and decide, because you know whatever might now come of that trust action, it can't harm the beneficiary. In fact, it has to benefit the beneficiary. So this is where you're getting into the idea that you are upholding the rights as beneficiary. If they are forsaken, broken, not given, then you're going to chancery because your rights have not been upheld. As long as you can show in your paperwork that you did everything correctly, which is why you want the court of record, but you want the notice of special appearance, because you're making it clear in that initial response that you are a settler beneficiary with interest in blah, blah, blah. So it's exceptionally important. And these videos that I've been using, example, Chris Hauser, etc., is because not necessarily I'm saying get onto the 1099 stuff, which is your choice. I don't do it. I'm not promoting that. But he's showing you again that these terms, court of record, special appearance, are important because they're part of the system. Yeah, he got blanked up, but it was complete setup. But it will probably be, in fact, it will be because what he was doing in that original, they still had joinder on the fact that he was filling out the forms, so therefore he was still assigned the social security number. That'll be why he did the 3 years. Now, I've not watched him for a while, I've got to be honest. So I've not watched quite a lot of his recent, maybe in the last 4 weeks. I haven't really looked at 3 weeks, I don't know. So I don't know where he's at now, so you might know more than me. So choose heretic, choose coronation revolution now. Says it's the all new for 2022 Global Coronation Revolution Olympics with finish line awards ceremony and after party April 25th, 2022. Knowledge is power, so not looking confused. So no. It's the all new for 22. I'm not sure I get that. Participating nations will be judged on the categories of peacefulness, expediency, and oh well, we've had it then, haven't we? You've got Boris beating his chest down in Chalkir, Westminster. You've got Biden talking absolute gaga as an infant. Yeah, we're not going to go well on that judgment, are we? Let's be honest. And then, you know, you've got all these 80%ers giving you want to kill the Russians. I mean, I've looked at some of these videos. I think they've even been on telly this morning, where guys have gone over there to do the old mercenary stuff because they watched Rambo last night. And they're saying basically, well, there's nothing going on. Everybody's just carrying on as normal. Suggesting that all this hoo-ha you're getting on media is a bit of a fib. Also, I've had reports from Merck saying that, which is what I said originally, was, you know, how do you know you're not going over there just in a theatre that's ready-made for you to get slaughtered? You know? And lo and behold, one mercenary come back and said that's exactly what's happening. Keep well away, you're not going to get out. So it's just another way of getting rid of guys that need to be considering that you only need to go to that mode when Blighty is getting shafted even more in a physical manner. That's when you need, as a male, and even females, to start looking that, hang on a minute, pussyfooting around, bending over and pulling your pants down isn't working. So, you know, that's the energy you need to be saving for here, not off somewhere in the middle of a land renowned for Third Reich mentality and an attachment to the political movement that can't be named, and then bringing them all over here. If ever you wanted to kick off with the already installed Islamic opposite side to that movement that can't be spoken, then bring them all in and give them shelter. I know that in Clitheroe, 5,000 brand new houses, brand spanking new, 3, 4, 5 semi and detached houses are being handed to these so-called refugees. You, white blighties, try getting a brand new house. Try it. Can you not see how stupid you are if you've got a flag on your face ache, if you're even talking in relation to expending energy, money, efforts into what's happening over there in the Ukraine, then you are retarded beyond belief. You're not even at infant level, you baby, because you're just not savvy to what the hell is really going down. Okay. Boils down to the drama of the Knights of Malta playing chess. There's 30,000 knights and dames of Malta worldwide, and over 3,000 in the USA alone. Yeah, but the Knights of Malta were subdued under Napoleon's command to the Jesuits. The 1792, maybe, I think. And you've got to recognise that at that point, the Jesuits were not under Rome, they belonged to the Prussians. The same as Napoleon. So keep that in consideration. So when we attack all these Roman institutions, we're judging them based on what they've been doing since, let's say, 1814, when the Prussian Jesuit was installed into the Vatican system. Because that's what we don't like, the issues that came from then. Apparently, the number of knights and dames of Malta has increased since I asked maybe a week or two ago. Good, because if they turn back around and do the duty and serve what they're meant to be serving, that could be a bloody good thing. Just the same if the Masons pull the fingers out their arse and recognise that they're being bummed by the Prussian Jesuits. You know, 21st degree Prussian knight, guys. There's your Noachide judge. There is your Noachide judge. 21st degree Prussian knight, Scottish Rite. See, people, this is where it's been going on for a long time. And as I said, it's been put in America first with Reagan. And Public Law 102.14, this is Noachide, states that the Noachide laws are the foundation upon which American civilization was founded, and that it is our responsibility to educate America and even the world so as to return them to these laws. And that was signed in 1991. So they're basically saying you have to return to laws that have just been invented. Because my studies of Noah, I can't recall anywhere in that Noah were given any laws at all. At all. He might have exposed some of his own, a bit like Moses. But as we've just gone through in the other live streams, if it is the case that the tribe, the kingdom set up in the Levant back in the 8th century BC, were in fact the Aten cult, which got taken over by the Phoenicians and then used by the Phoenicians, then the Exodus wasn't an Exodus, they got kicked out. So then the Exodus is actually a take on them being kicked out. And using the term Exodus, of course, that makes them the victim, when in fact they had been perpetrators. So, you know, these things are important. So it's saying that it's been in Public Law 102.14, this is in America, that this is the Noachide laws have been put in. And then this law is preceded by proclamations of other presidents which endorsed the Noachide laws, and Rabbi Schneerson, the Chabad rabbi, or Chabad rabbi, who said that all those non-like those exist only for the benefit of those. And then in 82, President Ronald Reagan signed Proclamation 4921, in which he stated that the Noachide laws are the moral foundation of America's character, that the Noachide laws are a moral code for all, regardless of faith. And he also praised the Lubavitch movement and Rabbi Schneerson for their example in educating about the Noachide laws. He then requested Congress to sign Joint Resolution 477, which celebrates Schneerson's birthday as a national day of reflection. The Noachide laws state that idolaters, and which includes Christians, are to be killed. You know, what are they actually saying there? You know, it's quite worrying. So there's 7 proclamations or public laws and 2 proclamations which recognise the Noachide laws federally in the United States. Federally. So this Noachide system is the system that the banks want in, because it's coming through the bank system, the federal in America, through the Bank of England, and ultimately back into the Bank for International Settlements, and as into the hands of the Committee 300. Okay, so, you know, it's well bedded in the US. You can say we're bedded in here with the agreement with the UK government to allow the Rothschilds to bring in the Americans in the First World War. So that's 1914, when we were going to surrender. So you could suggest that we've been signing these treaties since 1914. Of course, being here in England, the most secretive nation on the planet, we only get to find out anything that goes on here by going over to America. So, you know, long live America, in my opinion. We do not want to divide as a people between Americans and English. The English 20% and the American 20%. We're not really bothered about the other 80% because they've pretty much secured the red anyway with the dancing they've just done in the last 2 years. So not to worry. So that's just a little bit on the Noachide, because a lot of people have been asking me what it's all about. And it just, the Noachide are the basis upon which the American nations was founded. Society is concerned with the weakening of the Noachide laws. This weakening of Noachide threatens society. It is the nation's responsibility to educate the public on these Noachide laws. Public Laws 97 and 166 has 2 unique statements: that the public needs a reminder about the duties of the Noachide laws, and that April 4th, 1982 will be a national day of reflection to commemorate the work of one Rabbi, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, in promoting the Noachide laws. The law was signed by President Ronald Reagan in 1982. So there we go, it's in. You know, they're in, and we've got 102 and 14 as well, 103 and 14, 102, 14, and these are all the Resolution 477, Proclamation 4921, and Law 102, 14. Those are where you'll find them in the American data. So that again is rather interesting, and I hope expands slightly on this system. We will look at it as we move. It's more just me finding what I have, because I did this a long time ago, enough to show me that it needed to be understood by people without necessarily getting into the ultimate nitty-gritty. But what I read, what I saw, gave real cause for concern in the sub-laws, especially in how it relates to what they're going to declare as idolatry, as and when it suits. So you may not be classed as an idolater at this particular stage because they have a use for you in dealing with those that they are classing, but ultimately, as it moves up the pyramid, you're going to get your turn where all the actions you've carried out previously against the others are going to put you in the same position. And that's what I could see clearly when I started to look into the sub-laws as the overriding narrative, or at least giving the ability for the priesthood to do that, which is interesting. So I just thought we'd look at this as well, just because we're looking at this inalienable rights and where they came from. So if we just go to the Bible, which is Genesis 27, it says the exact words, because I've used this phrase a lot and I misrepresent it. It says, God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. So that's the original ordination of who you are. And then, of course, you've got the rules of that because it goes through what you're in charge of, what you're not in charge of, blah, blah, blah. Everything else is Mosaic law. And Mosaic law, more than anything, is looking to me like it's the laws that were kicked out of Egypt, not that they ran. Not that they were on their own back doing it, that they were expelled. And they're the ones that have created this false system that we're all sort of suffering at the moment. So, okay, so that's that. So we'll go back. I'll have a look at what you're saying. Oh, somebody has a lot to say. Okay, choose your heretics. Just be careful. We're not big on throwing cusses at particular groups, because the main thesis of this narrative that I'm pushing is that we let go of all our perceived divisions, whether it be your left, your right, your Catholic, your Protestant, your Muslim, your Buddhist. These are the things that need to be removed. So what we're doing is trying to move in that direction. Your sort of stuff here isn't helping. All right, so this is choose your heretic to choose. So I'm going to ask you, can you stop, fill in the chat with stuff that we are already way past coming to terms with as not a good way to move forward in pulling people together. So I'll ask you nicely if you can stop that, please. Otherwise, I'll have to just give you some time out or something. But thanks very much. We know you've got plenty to say, but we just try and approach these matters a little bit different, because rather than raising anger from the cauldron, we're actually trying to create some peaceful interconnections by where we understand things, rather than looking at each other from where we come from. Sean and other peeps, are you all familiar with Baron David Ward's affidavit, which remains unrebutted? I haven't read it. I haven't seen it. I am aware of it. But then he did go back in and join the hospital. So you do have to be careful with these things, you know. They're not infallible. And they're not infallible because you can set it up there and then misrepresent it in your actions. So, look, let's look at it this way, because this is how important it is that everything we've discussed so far pulls together, in that you've got to cleanse yourself and put yourself on the pedestal that you're attempting to claim. So you're attempting to claim man, the jurisdiction as man. Well, as man, you're not messing around on assumptions and presumptions. You can't stop those assumptions and presumptions coming through your mind, but the minute you act on them, well, you're disproving, you're showing that you're not what you're claiming to be. You know, so if you're going to act in any way, you need to double check that what you have assumed, you're tracing to follow it to see if that bears fruit is correct or near. If it's not, you're not going to see it, are you? So it's one thing to think and assume on things. It's another to put into action your assumptions and presumptions, because it's only going to lead to nonsense because you didn't check that it were correct. Okay? So it's no good saying I want to claim the jurisdiction man, but I'm going to behave in everything I do as though I'm still in the legal system, because what that shows is that you actually are still there. Does that make sense? Because that is extremely important. You know, to move to this other position, you've got to become that and show it true. You might trip up every now and again. That's acceptable. But you've got to show that you've declared that, and that, well, you are that. You know what I'm saying? So important. You can't. It won't work. In your hands, it wouldn't work, because you'd undermine it every time you communicated in whichever way you communicated, if you get my meaning. Unrebutted affidavit means nothing. No, it does though, because it kept them away from him. It took him to go back into their system for them to have access to him, to do what they wanted to do. Always be asking them to prove the jurisdiction. Groundbreaking on the Pentagon building, September 11, 1941. LBJ's entitlements and exemptions start declaration of Jesuit order fascist supremacy. Well, you could say, in truth, that what killed JFK was the fascist Prussian imperial empire in the church, what had got hold in the church. So that's what killed JFK, who was just a Catholic. I mean, you know, to do what he did, he was going against everybody. He's father the law. He, regardless of what you think of him as a man, he's a man like all of us. He had the opportunity and like to throw it about a bit. But who wouldn't? Let's be honest. But in essence, once he got in, he went completely against the Prussian system, the CIA, etc. Because that's what the CIA is. OSS, Jesuit, intelligence. He went against it all. That's what he was doing. So you can see the division in what we class as the Rome. JFK, which is what a Catholic would do, versus the Prussian Jesuit and the CIA. Yeah, we know that, but there's no point in just attacking the Jesuits. So, again, I'm going to have to ask you, don't fill the chat with that. We've gone through all the Jesuits in many, many videos. We've gone through the history. We've gone through the shift. So you really need to understand that we already know that. Right. Well, I do understand that you've got serious problems in America. Well, that's true, legal maxim. You do not deny, admits, but it's the joinder. And I think that's what this guy's trying to get across that we're listening to. So I'll jump back to that. But please, any guys out there, you know, you're the censors. If that carries on, just sort it away, lads. Right, back to the vid. So 43, 47, so 46, 26. Right.
Thing at all, but nobody knew it. And over the years, they've increased the rate and all of that stuff. But everybody came into this voluntarily. They didn't know they were volunteering, and therein lies how you get out of it. Okay, but they did come into it voluntarily. So that's how the income tax got started. That's why, because it was known back then that if you work, your labor is an exchange for your compensation. There's no income there. If I buy something for $1 and I sell it for $2, I've made $1 in income. But if I go to work for you for an hour and you pay me $10, that's an exchange. That's what's called a zero-sum transaction. There is no income. There is no income at all until you fill out a 1040 form and you write on there, I earned $10 in taxable income. It is you, by signing that form, who are declaring it to be taxable, and that is why they can collect. And that is why the income tax is not unconstitutional. The 16th Amendment is irrelevant. It has no enabling clause. Check the 17th, check the 15th.
So can you see, it's like what we've been saying all the time. Everything is by consent. You're entering into contract, albeit by a fraud. But you've got to recognise that before you recognise there's a fraud. And then you've got to work out how you can pursue those frauds. And, you know, it's so important that, you know, I know a lot of people are really going for this limited company thing, but personally, I'm not so sure it's gonna give you the protection you need when you need it. We might be wrong, but just keep these things in mind, because it doesn't matter if you've done it. It doesn't matter. But the thing is, don't stop learning. Don't rest on your laurels if you're comfortable with what you're doing at the moment, because, you know, it's a move, but it's, in my opinion, it's not a move to checkmate. Far from it. In fact, it could reverse that checkmate. But I don't know. But if you've done that, it doesn't matter. You don't need to panic about it. You're just being aware, you're moving, and we're all learning. That's the trick of it, really. I mean, we are running out of time, of course. So he says...
With Brent Johnson, if you enjoyed the first half, you're really going to enjoy the second half, where we get deeper into the weeds.
Into the weeds.
When you deal with the Social Security number, you become immune to these regulations because they don't apply to you. They only apply to U.S. corporate federal citizens. And when you give up the number, you are no longer one of those.
So he's saying pretty much what some of the guys I know have done is until you relieve yourself of the social security number, you're still fixed. You're still given joinder. And that said, you've got to put that in context in relation to if you are attempting to get money out of this, what you're actually doing is just another way to keep you in. Yeah? That's what, this is why we've put this up. It's important because, you know, so many of you are chasing the money, and that's fine. It's yours by right. But, you know, to get that, you're really going to have to jump through. And you've got it so barred up now in these courts because, of course, the corporate courts. Your only remedy is to go through the first motion with you, have it proven that they're not upholding the rights of the beneficiary, and then take it to Chancery. There you will succeed, as long as you've got the evidence that that is exactly what's taken place. And you'd have to do that in the paperwork before the court, because there's not a court of record. It isn't a court of record, so you can't use anything from that court in your case in the Chancery. You would have to show that they're not upholding the rights of the beneficiary in the paperwork before the court. You don't even have to go to the court. You could even put the paperwork in, get the signatures, proof it's been, and then let them do the little shindig, and away you go to Chancery. You don't even have to go to the little shindig. It's pointless anyway, because you know, they're just abusing the entire game. There we go.
Okay, the Social Security number is the joinder for the entire system, all of it. Okay, when you get a social, you have to understand the number. The old Social Security cards actually used to say on them, this number is the property of the United States government. It actually used to say that on there, and that hasn't changed. It doesn't say it anymore, but I mean, the fact has not changed. The number itself is the property of the government. So it is not your number. It has been assigned to you. In other words, federal property has been attached to you. Everywhere you go, you walk around with this federal property attached to you. That's why you are subject to federal jurisdiction, because you're walking around with the government's property. So here's the thing. Assignment, okay, is a legal process. And accepting the Social Security number, okay, is part of entering into a contractual relationship with the government. And in any contractual relationship, when you enter into it, there are 4 necessary components to that entry into the contract. They are, it must be a knowing, intelligent act, intentional, and voluntary. Now, that means you have to know what you're doing. That's number 1. It has to be an intelligent act. You have to have considered and thought about it. Intentional means you have to intend the consequences of entry into the agreement. And voluntary is self-defining. It has to be voluntary. So let me ask you a question. When you first got your Social Security number, or if you got it as a minor when you turned 18, did any government official ever tell you that having the number was voluntary, and by accepting it, you were waiving your rights? Yes or no?
No.
Exactly. That being the case, the contracts are actually void. Yeah? Because it's a fraud. So, again, I move back to this get to grips with the trust itself. Yeah? Understand what it is, and more importantly, your relationship or interest to it, because it's been set up by another as a trust to benefit the beneficiary, which is the name on it. Their trickery is to get you to relieve yourself of that, you see. Date of birth, license, bank account, you know, all these terms that are all contracts with this legal person. You know, that's the trickery. So again, that's where I would encourage folk to go to, because that's where it's at. So we're all
start to discover the fraud, does any kind of statute of limitations come into effect? So here is the key. Okay, you have to, and it's not actually returning. The term would be rescinding. You have to rescind the number itself. And the way you do that is, it's not your number. You can't do anything with it. What you can do is take back your permission, that is your signature on the application for the number. And if your parents signed for you as a minor and you didn't do anything when you turned 18, it becomes your signature. And you take back your permission for them to assign their number to you, retroactive to the original assignment of the number. What that means is that you have never had a social security number, because anything that is based on fraud is invalid in law. It completely vitiates all contracts and all agreements. So since the number was not properly assigned to you, it was never assigned to you. You have never had a number, and if somebody asks you, you can honestly say, I've never had a number, and you say, due to my sincere religious conviction. You don't have to tell them what your religion is. Those 3 words are specific, and they invoke religious protections and religious discrimination laws that are on the books. And so by rescinding your permission for them to assign their number, it means you've never had a number. Technically, it means you're entitled to all the money you ever put into Social Security and income tax back in your pocket. Don't get excited. It's not going to happen. Okay, and the corrupt courts and everything, forget it. It's just not going to happen. When I did this, I considered that all that money that I put into Social Security and income tax was the price of my tuition for my education on this. And that way, you know, I was able to acclimate to it. Because a lot of people will say, I'm not going to give up my number. I put all that money into it and everything. I'm not going to give up that number. And the bottom line is, if you really want to reclaim your rights that you have waived, see, that's when you waive them. When you accepted the number, part of that agreement is, in order for you to be controlled by the government, you have to waive your rights. That
interesting, is it not, that it's a number? You know, concentration camps and numbers, slavery, march. You know, this is where we're at with this. You know, it's serious stuff.
That's why you have no constitutional protections, because you waived your rights. And the Constitution, you don't have any constitutional rights. You never did. Constitution is a limitation on government. It doesn't give you your rights. Your rights come from God. All the Constitution does is it prohibits the government from violating those rights. Well, since you have waived your rights, since you've put them on the shelf, the Constitution won't protect you anymore. Duh!
So there you go. And it's like, we discussed in earlier videos, the English Constitution, as good as it is, you're still a citizen. And the fact that the office of monarch has been usurped for a long time, it's not going to serve you, because the Constitution created the government, and it's the government that went bankrupt and has created the corporations. Yeah? So you're under the banks. It's bypassed any and all national law, and you're on administration policy under bankruptcy. And that is, it's seriously important. And so it's only supporting and what we've already covered, really. But it's good to hear it from an American perspective, to be honest. And this is the last section I got to do today.
What you're what your taxable income is. Okay, when you deal with the Social Security number, you become immune to these regulations because they don't apply to you. They only apply to U.S. corporate federal citizens. And when you give up the number, you are no longer one of those. And just like, the IRS regulations don't apply to a citizen of Japan living in Tokyo. They just don't apply. I mean, they don't have universal application. Who do they apply to? They apply to U.S. citizens. If you do what you just suggested, you retain your Social Security number because you can't file these forms without it. You retain your Social Security number, you are still a U.S. citizen. You still have no rights. You may or may not be successful. Let me tell you why. Okay, now XYZ Corporation that you mentioned, okay, files a 1099 with the IRS. And let's say they're paying you $1,000 a week. Okay, so they file a 1099-S for, whatever, maybe quarterly or something like that. And they say, okay, we have paid Sean $12,000 in taxable earnings. Okay, they file that, and the IRS, next to Sean's name, has column A and column B. I'm simplifying it. Okay, they get that 1099-S and they put in column B $12,000. And now they wait for Sean to file a 1099 that says I earned $12,000. And then they put $12,000 in column A. Column A matches column B. They check it off. They go to the next taxpayer. Now, if Sean doesn't file a return, okay, they come out and they say, well, we got $12,000 in column B, but nothing in column A. Then they contact Sean. They say, according to our records, you owe us yada, 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 yada. Now, if you, file a revised return and you say that the actual amount is zero, then it's going to come out in column A. You file a return, zero. Okay, so zero does not match $12,000. They're still going to come after you, and they're still going to, try. Now, you may have arguments that you can make, which may or may not be successful, in taking into account that the courts are corporate courts, not legitimate judicial courts. Okay, I don't think that you have a very good chance of winning, but you might if you're smart and if you're able to conduct yourself in a court venue. But I think going to court is a last resort. It's really not a great option. Here's the thing. If you don't actually file anything, ultimately, it is XYZ company that holds the liability because they are the ones who declared the $12,000 to be taxable income. They declared it. Now, you understand, when I work for you for an hour, you pay me $10. Like I said, there's no profit there. There is no income there. There is no income tax. And everyone knew that before the advent of what I told you happened after the repeal of victory tax. Everybody knew that. Okay? Today, everybody goes to their attorneys and their certified public accountants, certified by whom? To find out what they owe. They don't take it on themselves to determine that. So they are told, and they do what they are told, which we talked about earlier. Okay, but the reality is that your earnings for labor are in exchange. There is no tax there. It only becomes taxable because either you or the company have declared it to be so. And when you do, you become liable for it. When you file a 1040 form that says I earn $12,000 in taxable income, okay, and you sign your name to that, guess what? Now they can collect it because you declared it to be taxable. Well, in this case, the XYZ company is the one that declared it to be taxable. So they're the ones that are liable until and unless you, Sean, file the return for column A.
So I thought that were interesting. That regardless of what approaches you might take, if you don't sort it out with the national insurance number, you've still got joinder. Well, somebody else took over now. Right, looks like we've got some numpties. Moore's life. Conditional acceptance will keep you honourable. Yeah, conditional acceptance. Yeah, that's important, definitely. You apply to the beneficiary of the trust, correct. Don't give up the number. Affidavits are for high courts. Learn to use it. It's trust. You just have to know you're standing under God and above quasi-governmental corporations. Like can only contract with like, not your living man, correct. Conditional acceptance doesn't work, neither does A4V. Well, what you also have to remember is if you're using these formats and they're not working, there's always a potential that you've done something incorrect. You know when you're onto it because they don't respond. Because you've put them into a checkmate. You've got them in a position where they can no longer pursue that what they were pursuing because you've removed the assumption, as it were. Socialist trust account created for your benefit. Yeah, that's crap. It is. But it's a prepaid system and it only pays for your expenses. It's not there to buy your Ferraris, as I understand it. But it's there for you to pay your expenditure. So it will buy you a motor, it will buy you an house. But, you know, I think in the old school it was appropriate to your standing as well as to your benefit. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where you're coming from with the conditional acceptance doesn't work. Like I said, if you've had a bad... if things don't work, then rather than saying the instrument doesn't work, you might apply yourself to what you've actually done and where did you go wrong. Because, you know, we make these mistakes because we don't see things. And then it's by doing it, analysing it, sometimes we can work out what we didn't do or what we did do that cocked it up. Okay, Mars Life, we pretty can see that you're not having it, but we get it. You don't have to keep going on about it. So you're saying, Mars Life, is disinformation. Well, we're not on here now saying do this, do that. What we're doing is exploring. All right? So we're not giving out disinformation. We're looking at the offerings of a guy, is it Brent Johnson? Because I think it's rather intriguing what he's saying, because it is very in sync with what we've been putting together. So if you want to say it's disinformation, fine, but show us how it's so. Don't just tell us. Show us. Okay? You don't rescind anything. Well, I'm not rescinding anything. Only thing that I've been rescinding is the assumptions. Okay, this and the number is a bit more than that, isn't it? It's not an assumption. It's a fact that it exists. So that's why we're exploring this, because we need to know: is that the case, or is it another? Why are you committing fraud? How are you committing a fraud? Explain. Now, you're very excitable, whoever you are. LL. Starting late from the beginning, so that. Right, I think what we've got, guys, is Intel. We've got a couple of Intel keep changing their little formats, all right. So, who's a disinformation agent? Right. So, wait a minute here. I forgot how to do it. Here we go. Yeah. I don't know. Okay. I say, thank you for that. Okay. No, we're always up. This is what we're doing. We are exploring. So a bit less of your vim and vigor there, lads. You're just a bit too much. It's not helping anybody. What's the false allegations? No, somebody. Right, you're way off track, lad. So you need to calm down because we're not actually interested. And there is one more thing I'd like to just, because this is just, this is what we need to see, really. This is Joe Biden, actually. So see what you think of this, because obviously he doesn't think the cameras are rolling. So here's what he said, and this is to the day.
Can you all see us and hear us? Perfect. Jay, you're beginning to convince the American people there is a thing called climate crisis. About time.
There you go. Bigging up one because she turned around and she's now bigging up and getting people to believe in the nonsense, the latest nonsense. All right, so I'm going to say to you all, till the next time.